It's great to have you all on the line tonight. I'm Paul Costello. I'm the director of the Vermont Council on Rural Development, but more to the point, I'm the chair of the local recovery and community solutions working group of the task force, the Governor's Recovery Task Force. And I'm welcoming you all to the Franklin County Forum. This is the first county-wide forum that we've put together. So we're trying out new technologies. We're trying out a strong agenda. We've worked with a great steering committee of local leaders to frame an agenda, to dig in forums around topics that are of pertinence to the future of recovery and resilience in Franklin County. And we're deeply honored to have you all with us. I'm going to turn it to the administrative liaison from the Agency of Commerce, Josh Hanford, Commissioner of Housing and Community Affairs, to share some welcoming reflections from the administration. Josh.
Thanks, Paul. Good evening, everyone. As Paul said, I'm Josh Hanford, Commissioner of Vermont Department of Housing and Community Development, and the liaison for the Local Solutions and Community Action Team, which is part of the Governor's larger Economic Recovery and Mitigation Task Force. And on behalf of the Agency of Commerce, Community Development, and the Governor, just want to really thank everyone for coming out tonight and participating in this virtual forum. This is, you know, new way of doing business for all of us. And thanks for coming out on such a nice evening. And you know what I just want to say real briefly is that in many ways we're struggling with finding a way to say that we're in recovery already with this pandemic. You know, we know there's still a lot of response going on. But we need to start planning for that recovery. And we all know that recovery starts local, and that, you know, that's what we're here to talk to you about, learn from folks in the county about how to best plan for that recovery in Franklin County and build on what's already been started and share what your successes are as we go on this summer and fall with other regions of the state. So just thanks for coming out tonight and participating, and also for all the other team members from the Local Solutions and Community Action Team on this this call. You know, thanks for all your work and the heavy lift here. So thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Josh. The Governor, when he structured his recovery effort, he had one group that was really looking at the immediate financial needs of businesses for its recovery. He had another group that was really looking at the feathering process of reopening businesses, at the protocols for the first stages of recovery. And then he had our group, which was really looking, I think he recognized that all solutions aren't going to come from Washington, D.C., or from the monies that may come from Washington, D.C., that recovery isn't just going to come from Montpelier, that it comes town to town, it comes from community groups, it comes from people who put themselves on the line for their communities. And there's an enormous power in trying to add up some of that energy, some of those stories. And when you think about all the work that's being done, probably all of you are engaged in one way or another. All the work that's being done in Franklin County and the other counties in Vermont, we need to learn from each other. So he really turned to us to say, let's look at best practices and models that are going on in different communities that could be shared, that we could mutually educate and encourage ourselves. So when we think about the way that we're using these county-wide forums, we really have a few primary purposes. We want to hear from local folks about the challenges that they're facing. We want to share some best practices in the topic areas that the county wants to explore, and those are the 4 areas that Jenna will go through in a minute. We want to share what other places have done, but we also want to learn what you're doing, what creative ideas have emerged in your community and in Franklin County that we could then take on the road to Brattleboro and Rutland County and other places around the state as they struggle with how they're going to move forward. We also want to be sure, as we reach out to Vermonters in this age of deep challenge to us, and that challenge goes everywhere from the health challenge to the economic challenge to the challenge of how we work together in unity as a people, that we listen to people, that everyone is infinitely valuable as a Vermonter for our future. And that means we want to listen to people and all listen to each other. And so bear with us through this process. Let's pay attention to what each of us has to say. And let's especially reach out and understand that the COVID crisis has hurt some of us worse than others, people who are most challenged, people who have been historically marginalized in our communities. And this is a time to look more deeply at these issues and see how we partner together to make progress. So that's a second thing. We also are going to be listening hard. We have a great resource team with us tonight that's going to be in each of these separate focus forums. And they're going to be thinking through what's going on in the conversation to think about ways that they may be able to help, how they could potentially provide technical assistance, what potential funding resources may be available. We're not going to build a big strategic plan for Franklin County tonight, but we may find some nuts and bolts of work that can follow this call and where we can build connections to help people in the county move forward. Finally, all of these conversations are going to be an incredible window into the heart and soul of Vermont. And we're deeply excited about hearing what Franklin County is doing. And then as we go to the next counties, as we move around the state, what are the fundamental issues that are ongoing challenges, barriers, and opportunities that we can be then sharing with the governor and the administration and legislators and other policymakers to help the state step up and meet you all halfway and help build something bigger than we can do if we're all in our own corners. So it's an awesome opportunity for us. Deeply appreciate everyone being on the phone with us. And I'm going to turn to Jenna Kolosky, who's the VCRD Community Programs Manager, and who's going to walk us through the agenda and gear us up for our breakouts. Jenna?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being on the call. So we have to head over into our breakouts now, but we really want to take some time to just walk through how to get there, because as Paul said, this and Josh, this is a new way of interacting for us. We'd really prefer to be with you all in person, but this is the way we figured that we could all connect, and I want to walk through how to do it. So the schedule for this evening, in just a second here, we're going to head into our breakouts. I want to thank the steering committee of regional leaders and representatives that came together to help identify the topics for the breakout discussions and the issues that are most important to address in Franklin County today. So our topics are supporting municipalities in recovery, overcoming isolation and building community connection, advancing telecommunications access and affordability, and supporting Franklin County businesses. And in each of those breakouts, you'll have a facilitator to guide the discussion. We have a series of questions we want to walk through to collect input and to facilitate the sharing of ideas and strategies. But we're also going to have some time for folks on the visiting team to share some recovery strategies that they're implementing in their region. And then at the end, to reflect on the conversation and share some potential resources and ways that they or others might be able to support the work in Franklin County.
The use of technology such as what we're doing right now, I think gives all of us the opportunity to make positive steps. I'll give one example of our business where we have found that by using teleconferencing, we have been able to decrease the no-show rate for our outpatient therapists. So where years ago, somebody in Enosburg, as an example, might have a transportation issue and they couldn't get into St. Albans, now they can sit at home in Enosburg and have that session take place and still have it be confidential and all the other things that need to happen. But they don't have to be concerned with, oh, by the way, my ride didn't come through, or my car broke down, or maybe I have a childcare situation that I couldn't make the appointment. Those barriers are now broken down by using this sort of technology.
Great, thanks, Joe. Yeah, that's great. So something we'd like to kind of see is using technology in new ways and getting a little innovative with how we're able to connect, but just in a different way. And I see Pam's hand. Before I go to Pam, I just want to mention I'm seeing that Mike in Groton has joined us. And we asked Mike to be with us because similar to Rebecca, and Bethel is doing some really great work on this, bringing folks together in Groton. And maybe Mike, at the end, you could share some insight into what you guys have been up to. Great. Pam, go ahead. You need to, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, got it. So when I think of isolation and the county, Pam Parsons, I'm the executive director of Northern Tier Center for Health. We have clinics throughout the county. One tool that I think of that I don't know how to use, but I think it could help, is we have a rail trail that, you know, ends in Richford and runs all the way through into St. Albans. And then there's another one that crosses from Swanton and heads towards Morrisville. You know, it's something that can bring people together in some way and bring communities together. And so I do think of that as an opportunity, but I don't know how to use it, but I feel like it's a way to help reduce isolation. And the second thing was, I think of, this is telecommunication a little, but having some type of kiosks in all the communities, so people that don't have access to internet do have a place where they can use it. The internet is, I think, essential, and all small, so that they can communicate it out, even if it's to their family or friends or their medical provider.
That's great.
Yeah.
And with the rail trail thing, Pam, I love that. And I want to hold on to, I'm kind of taking some notes of some of these things that when we get to thinking a little bit deeper into ideas that I want to come back to and think with the group about, like, are there ways that we could be capitalizing on some of those assets that you already have in the area. Hi, Judy, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Judy Paxman from Swanton. I'm the executive director of the Swanton Arts Council, and I'm an assistant librarian at the Swanton Public Library. One of the things that we've lost a lot, and I'm trying to figure out a way, this is what I want, is to come up with a way to connect people who are either not comfortable or not technologically skilled or have those opportunities to still continue to make connections. I don't know what the best way is, but we have seen a lot of people join us in some Zoom events who previously weren't able to join us at either library or arts council functions. But there's a lot of people who used to, with the library specifically, but also with the arts council, we were their only friend. We were their only connection to the community. They would come to us and ask us questions that weren't really related to what the meeting was about or whatever the gathering was about, but we were their one connection to the community. And now that everything's closed up, what I really want is to figure out a way to make a more personal connection and do it safely. And we've done a bunch of things. We can talk about all the things we've done down the road if you want to. We've done curbside pickup, and we've done weekly art journaling and different things. But it's getting to those people who've lost their friends.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone has a suggestion on that.
Yeah, well, let's get into that a little bit more as well. I mean, I feel like I'd love to hear if anyone has any other thoughts on kind of what you'd like to see and what you hope for in this arena. And then I do want to, it feels like we're edging into some of those challenges a little bit. Like, what about those, what's holding us back from achieving connection? Well, some folks may not, have others to connect to or have a way to do it or not have the technological capability. That's the real challenge. But any other thoughts just on kind of your hopes in this arena and what you'd like to see in terms of connecting community? Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges about this pandemic is its lack of drama, if you will. It's not like the hurricane. It's not even like the flood. There's not a beginning, a middle, and end during which events take place that are dramatic and even traumatic, but bind us together in a common experience. And I've sort of used this analogy before that, after a storm blows through, you get with your neighbor and you say, boy, that tree came down 3 inches of my garage. I was so lucky. Somebody else couldn't get the generator started. They haven't had water for a day and a half. We trade stories, and those stories bind us and connect us, and in many ways help dissipate some of the kind of impacted emotional power of these events. This doesn't allow that. We don't even know when it will end. I mean, I think the rail trail is a great idea. Wouldn't it be wonderful if every town had on the same day had an event or had a kiosk or something, or term again, marking the end of the pandemic? But when's that going to be? And so how do you, and yet we're all suffering under this. We're all suffering under a real event that's impinging tremendously on our lives. So how do we validate that in people? And how do we find a common language or a common, set of images or something that makes this thing real? And I think that's the problem. There's no naturally occurring nodes around which we can gather, to talk about and join with one another around the trauma of this event. And I don't know how to create it. I mean, it's really challenging. It's not there.
Yeah, that's interesting. And there isn't this kind of, it happens and then it's over and then we all rally, like maybe in Irene, where we all got together and said, now we pick up the pieces. And yeah, it's a lingering challenge. Absolutely. So thoughts on those challenges and impacts. Kathy, go ahead. Hi, Kathy.
Hello. Robert and I are in many of these forums together, and I love it when he tells that story because it's such a perspective that we forget about, and it's just so big without any shape what's going on with COVID-19. And I work with the second chance individuals, and I don't know what ideas I have, but I can tell you this. We run a transition house of 10 guys. And sort of like what Judy said is that those guys rely on us for stuff that you can't even imagine. But during this pandemic, the whole house kind of went a little nuts. They just were doing things we hadn't seen before. Individuals that had been following the rules suddenly weren't. And it became very difficult for, 4 of us to manage. And what it all came down to is no matter what you're doing, no matter your socioeconomic, no matter whether or not you're on probation and parole or not, is that lack of human contact. So whomever they considered to be their family, and it's not the traditional family some of us might think of, it's the guy they grew up with in school and maybe went to jail with, right? But it was that lack of contact that they needed every single day to validate themselves that just kept undermining any progress that they were making. And I don't know, we keep trying to put our finger on what it was we could do for them. There's only 10 of them. What is it we can do to support these guys to bring back that sense of their community? And, we haven't yet found it. We try to support them. So when we talk about rail trails and we talk about the museum and we talk about the Art Council and the events they do or the walls that they do, it's wonderful. But there's this whole community on the fringe that was equally as affected. And we can't forget about them when we're thinking about the solution. I don't know what the solution is, but when we're thinking about it, we can't think of the most traditional ways that we engage our community and forget about them, because there's a lot of them. At any one time, there are between 600 and 800 guys and gals on probation and parole in Franklin County and Grand Isle County. So they're here, and we need to support them as well.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kathy. That's such an important point. I don't know if you said, for some people on the call who may not know, did you say where you work? I'm
sorry. I now work at Franklin Grand Isle Restorative Justice Center.
Great, thanks.
And I probably didn't. I'm Robert Ostermeyer from Franklin Grand Isle.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and yeah, I just want to reflect on that. Like when I kind of have mentally moved on to this question because we went there anyways around like what's holding us back from achieving this, and like. It's such an important point, Kathy, and I want to kind of dig into that like one thing that's holding us back, right, is that we're not all experiencing this equally, and the solutions aren't going to be the same for everyone, and I'm glad that you brought that up. Other thoughts around that, around what are the needs and challenges you're seeing today? Crystal, is that a hand up?
Sure. I'm Crystal Landman from Franklin County Caring Communities. I also am representing the Mukwambe of Missisquoi and the Abenaki Nation at Missisquoi. kind of tagging along with what Kathy said, I work with youth primarily. And we found ourselves during this really shifting our focus from substance use prevention specifically to just meeting basic needs for kids. We found ourselves, and I say we because my other half in the office is Marianne Hunkin, and she runs the Watershed Mentoring Program. And we found ourselves, you know, making sure that kids had safe places to stay at night. We found ourselves making sure that kids had food on the table for themselves and their family, and that may not have had the access to the internet to stay connected with their peers and ourselves. So we found ourselves doing a whole lot of check-ins with kids that we typically weren't doing. We found a lot of barriers for young people to try to overcome. And we thought we had done a really great job at connecting kids to services within the community, but a lot of families just didn't know about the services that existed. So I'm hoping that we can kind of get those services out there and better known.
Great, thanks. I mean, I'm hearing generally folks sharing a challenge around this communication piece, like letting people know what's available and how to reach them. So I want to come back to that. I don't know what I see S. Brewer, and I don't know what your first name is, but go ahead.
Hi, Steve Brewer from Northwest Counseling and Support
Great.
Services,
Thanks.
Director of Behavioral Health. I mean, kind of echoing what other people were saying, I just think a developmental approach about what are the unique needs of kids and youth, what are the unique needs of adults, what are the unique needs of older adults. I was troubled to learn that we had lost, and maybe Rob and others are more current on this than I am, but the Care Partners, a day program for older adults, lost funding for their program, and I even think there may have been a death by suicide as a result, but that's not okay. It's like that's a community connection for older adults that's been dissipated, and like we've got to figure out something there. But I don't know if that's been remedied or not. Melissa Southwick, last time I spoke to her, said they had lost funding. But
did I see in the news today that that a recovery program in Franklin County also was cut recently?
Yeah, the Center for Hope and Recovery, which was run out of Northwestern Medical, lost funding as a result of some of the budget cuts.
Yeah, so gosh, like such critical services during this time, and to lose that is devastating.
Yeah, statewide, we're seeing an increase of overdoses to opiates, and that's a program for medically assisted treatment program. There is a plan. It's not clear what it is, but it's going to have an impact on our community for sure.
Yeah. Judy, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say repeat what these last couple people have been saying. It's these people who are the most fragile or at risk. We need to do. It's harder to do more. I mean, it's harder to do less with our doors closed than it is to just do what we did before. So we're working harder, and now we're all at risk to have funding cut. We're very fortunate in the Arts Council that we're self-funded and we do whatever we want when we feel like it. But for the library, it's a very real concern that we'll be able to continue services. And there's all these people who, just little things of like having a public bathroom that they can use, or a cool place to sit in, or this is their link to the world because they use the internet, and that one smiling face that they saw 2 or 3 times a week, that is gone. So if we can come out of this, what I'm really looking for from this whole discussion is what are safe ways that we can have face-to-face conversations that don't involve a Zoom meeting or anything electronic. Is it like, I'll seriously wear a full body condom if I have to, if it means just being able to talk with somebody, because it's so incredibly needed. People are, I forget your first name, the gentleman with the, who's lost his funding there. It's people are, need this interaction, this place to feel belonging. So that's another way to put it, is they need they've completely lost their connection to the community.
Judy, maybe that's a project for the Arts Council, a full body condom, artistically done.
Yeah.
There you go.
That'll be fun. Well, I'll put that on the list.
Well, and it's a great question you pose, and I want to hold on to that when we get to ideas. And I want to go to Kathy on this topic of challenges, and then I do want to move on to think about what's going on today. Kathy, go ahead.
Did you say me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Judy hit it. Judy said it. And I think that, you know, I worry all the time how we're going to move beyond this if it never goes away, right? If we're finding ourselves in December and we're still not able to meet with clients and without protection, then let's figure out how we meet with clients with protections. We're still not, we have the 10 guys in our transition house, but DOC has not released us to meet with all of the other clients, of which I normally have 30 to 40 of them. Mm-hmm. And it's as equally as valuable to me to do my job as it is for them. I need to sit in front of them. I need to see them. I need to take in what they're talking about when they're speaking about jobs and their hopes and the career goals they always had that never came to be. And, you know, it's that I need that contact as much as they do. So if we can't, if we can talk about all the other stuff that we could be doing, and we should be, right? Making sure people know about the rail trails, making sure they know that they can still go to the library at certain times, all of those things. But really what it might come down to is how do we find a way to interact one-on-one with individuals in a new way? Not through Zoom, but through them sitting across the table at me and me seeing their actions when I ask them what it is that they've always dreamed of doing. Right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know how we do that. That's up to, you know, but.
Well, let's think on that a little bit. Before I go to Lisa and Robert, just to be sure that we're not missing anyone. I'm Pam, Paula, Roy, folks on that haven't had a chance to share. If there's anything you guys want to share, go ahead. You're back.
Pam?
Thank you for the
Okay.
presentation. I'm a shy person. However, I live in Fairfax. Sometimes teach at the BFA, so-called retired, but who retires these days when cost of everything is increasing around us.
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate the comment that Judy made about community contact and community connection. Thought that it was triggered by her comment. It was an experience I had back in the 70s when I was living in Hanover. When I moved to Hanover, I've been living in Fairfax 10 plus years, Vermont over 30 years. But when I moved, even though I was a single person at that time, I was struck by the community outreach. It was a mission of a core group of the neighbors to go around and knock on the door and say, hey, just being friendly. I've remembered that over the years. I've lived in 8 other states and various cities, communities, villages, professionally moved from one spot to another, but never felt that level or experienced that level of quote intimacy, except when I was growing up on my grandfather's farm there in segregated Tennessee, but we still had outreach. I don't know if the times and the isolation and the divisiveness rule out that kind of intimacy or not. I tend to believe it does not. Our village here, as you probably know, somewhat 4,000 people, 3,500 when we moved in, about 4,500 at the moment here in Fairfax. But that's a dimension that's not costly, maybe a little shoe leather. Easily identify who the neighbors are who may move in. I say may because we've gone from 3,500 to 4,500. Chittenden Franklin County has a rating of number of people coming here because of a number of beautiful bells and whistles, but there's still an isolation factor. Whether we talk about transportation or youth looking for a place to go and find things positive to do. But more and more just knocking on the door, saying hello. I think we can do that.
Yeah, thanks, Roy. I appreciate that. And I know, I think that's something we've seen some towns around the state during this time try and bring back, the kind of personal phone calls and safe door knocking. And so I appreciate that comment. Let's go to Robert and then Lisa. Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of second what has been said around this whole issue of contact and so on and so forth, and the kind of cost we're all enduring now because we're unable to make that kind of human contact. I had to go out and meet some people at some of the motels who are housed now through the state. And this was a couple of weeks ago. And it was literally the first contact I'd had with clients in 6 weeks or more. And was surprised at how thirsty I was just for that kind of contact. So anyway, I think one of the projects that we can come up with is on a very practical level, where do we get the plexiglass and the materials and the design expertise to know how we can have contact with people at the library, in our offices, in the workplaces and settings that we have, in the transitional housing for the folks from corrections, and set some standards so people can be safe. Otherwise, people are going to either be completely isolated or they're going to violate the isolations out of sheer cussedness. And present risk. So as we're saying, as Kathy said, if this goes on for a long time, what can we as a community do to set standards and to promote those standards of what constitutes safe contact? And literally provide agencies. You won't imagine how hard it is to try to get a sheet of plexiglass these days, but to provide some kind of support, design support, building support, as well as materials and cost for places like the libraries. So you can sit down with somebody safely and have a conversation because that infrastructure is going to be important to keeping us all safe and accepting that infrastructure in a way that the community accepts it as necessary.
Yeah, and what I like in what you're saying, Robert, is that it's not just about each library figuring it on their own, but some kind of collective model and support to support these really critical community supports and institutions. That's great. Lisa, go ahead. Oh, sorry, you had a follow-up?
Letting people know what's safe, okay?
Yeah.
So that people have a standard that they can recognize this is a safe space because these elements are in place, and I can have contact here.
Yeah, thanks.
One really strong theme in the conversation was about the financial picture for municipalities. There is a fair amount of sort of disruption and uncertainty about what tax receipts are going to look like as we head into the fall. And each municipality, one of my takeaways is that each municipality is a little bit different in that regard. There's no uniformity there, but that it's serious. It's serious for our municipalities as they think about that. And some of our municipalities, like Enosburg, have utilities as part of their work. And so there's arrearages there that they've got to be thinking about as well. A really strong theme, though, was about towns just adapting to the needs of the community across their work, figuring out how to meet the needs of their residents and do that in creative ways. As Ted Brady said, really figuring out how to say yes and then to creatively problem solve, whether that's a vote that happened in Montgomery. There was a bond vote that just happened and passed, and they used the firehouse, right? The big open bays of the firehouse to facilitate voting in person for those who wanted to vote in person, but in a way that felt really safe and with the appropriate protective equipment. Or, in Enosburg Falls, that, this fortuitous, they just hired a new economic development person, and the ability of that person to build a website and keep that website updated such that people knew what businesses are open, what are their protocols, and what are those dynamics, that information sharing and that responsiveness. You know, another example from Montgomery is the firefighters normally do a big barbecue every year, and they figured out how could they do it with takeout instead of in person. So it's just those creative ways to problem solve and retain a little bit of the normalcy that I think so many people are just yearning for during these times. So thanks, Paul.
Thank you so much, John. And everyone should know that everything is being saved in terms of key ideas that were taken down by scribes, and there'll be the ability to access each of the forums electronically later. And Jenna will talk about that. But for right now, Jenna, you were working on overcoming isolation and building community connections with your discussion. Do you want to go next?
Sure, yeah, and we had a really great discussion. I just appreciate everyone on that call are working in really inspiring ways to support people in the community all across the region. So really great, deep conversation. I would say the challenges are what you would probably expect, that, you know, people are really hurting and people are really missing human connection, that they need to feel connected to their communities and to get the services that they need to survive and to thrive. And so some really significant challenges that we're facing. I would say it was interesting, and I would also say, you know, folks had some really good ideas around kind of how can we bring the community together, how do we connect virtually, what are the different ways we can use technology, but a really big emphasis in the conversation on the fact that not everyone in the region is feeling the impacts of this in the same way. That some people, you know, that the isolation may be a nuisance and it's challenging, but they can still connect, and they can connect with family and friends and to their libraries and to the services they need. There are some folks that are much more deeply impacted and potentially in a dangerous and unhealthy way. And, you know, folks that are in recovery, folks that are lower income, that don't have access to technology or to the equipment needed to access technology. So recognizing that there's some really, it's the whole spectrum of how you can support people and bring them together. And some people are going to need a lot more support. So the group talked about some ideas across a couple of different arenas. You know, from the higher level, recognizing that these institutions and organizations that are bringing these folks together and addressing isolation and addressing people's needs need funding. You know, the community libraries that are helping to build connections, especially prevention programs and recovery programs. This region has seen some cuts recently in some pretty critical services and programs, and so funding is needed and support is needed. That was a part of the conversation, but also some more kind of community level action that could be taken.
There's some stereotypes out there about older folks who might not want to use technology in that way, that hasn't been their experience at all. In fact, this is a way to bring in people who have maybe been isolated before. So while it's been an incredibly challenging time, it's really highlighted the opportunity and developed a kind of urgency of the moment when it comes to funding and implementation. So I think there was a really hopeful conversation in that way. In terms of the major kind of challenges that we heard about, they're not really surprising. At least the first one isn't surprising. It's just the enormous cost of broadband expansion and, you know, running fiber and the economic model of it. That it's very challenging to get that last mile. If it was cheaper, somebody could make money off of it very quickly. It would have been done by now. So there's a real recognition of that. But another issue that's really interesting is the need for more education around the issue, particularly to users, right? That we heard anecdotes that when fiber is running to someone's house, they'll often take the most economical model to get broadband or internet to the home. Again, that impacts the economic model that makes it all viable. But if folks really understood potentially the social or economic impact in a positive sense of having better access, more people would sign up, more people would take models that would make the system more economically viable. So there's work to be done around that user education. In terms of strategies or approaches that you know, could be used both here in Franklin County, but also shared, you know, there was a real emphasis on this idea of like, let's think about broadband beyond, you know, I'm calling it broadband without borders, right? That town borders, county borders, none of it makes sense when we're talking about broadband, right? That it follows the topography of the region and where the houses are. And so, you know, that means that we all need to be thinking regionally and across town boundaries. And, you know, that's why it's really exciting. One of the strategies that we're seeing really all over the state is the formation of communication union districts, or kind of municipalities that, similar to a water district, that could, you know, potentially implement fiber or communication district. And it's really exciting that there, you know, there's been renewed interest or increased interest in those communication union districts as a result of COVID. And there are now 9 in the state. The most recent one, or that's in the process of forming, is in Franklin County. So there's a really great opportunity to grow on that. And the other thing that we heard is, while that's a kind of nonprofit model that a lot of folks are exploring, it's also critically important to continue to remember the importance of public-private partnerships. You know, that this stuff, it's whether you're a nonprofit or a for-profit, you still got to pay for implementing and maintaining the system. So looking for any kind of partnership to help make that possible with, you know, existing providers or folks who have been doing this for a long time is a great move. And then the last kind of strategy I think is really critically important is, you know, we had some great legislators that were in our session, and they emphasized the importance of letting folks need to have their voices be heard, right? And so when there are challenges or when there are priorities that a community feels are really critical, they need to hear about it. And they need to know that, you know, things that the Public Service Department is doing are valuable and are helpful, or what a community needs. And, you know, I'm sure the same goes for our congressional delegation as well. So it was a great conversation, and really appreciated the opportunity.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you to all the facilitators. Could I ask everyone who's on the visiting team to raise your hand in front of the screen? And just, I want to thank everyone who's put in an extra number of hours to be part of this conversation after working long days on your regular jobs. It's great to be part of the conversation. I want to turn it to Jenna, who's going to tell us what comes next in terms of surveys, notes, how you access information. Go ahead, Jenna.
Yeah, just really quickly, so in follow-up to this, we're going to send out an email to all of you that were registered, and you'll have in there a link to a survey. Nick, our colleague, is going to place it into the chat here as well. So if there was an idea that you wanted to share but weren't able to, or if there are others that you think would want to provide input on these questions, then that survey would be the place to do it. We're also going to follow up afterwards with a collection of all the notes that our excellent scribes, thank you scribes, took tonight. And then also any input that went into the chat. We'll collect the chats in each of the breakouts to share. And we're also going to share back the contact info for the visiting team. The visiting team was here to share reflections tonight, but also we've asked them to be a resource to you all in an ongoing way. So we'll share that contact info as well as the list of resources for tonight. So feel free to reach out to us with any questions or additional input, but you'll see communication from us soon with all of that and follow up. And thanks again for being on the call.
Thanks, Jenna. So I would just close with a reflection of looking at your faces, seeing so many legislators, so many leaders, so many people who are on the line for their community right now. When you think about recovery, it's not going to come from Washington, D.C., and it can't come from Montpelier alone. It's about people having their back to the plow, putting in the sweat equity, doing their good duty to their neighbor, standing up to support local businesses, supporting agriculture. It's that door-to-door hard work that we do as neighbors in Vermont. And that's something that's incredibly precious to us. When you look at that national map and you look at where the coronavirus is growing, and you look where it's not right now, it's not just by accident. It's because people are on the line, people are caring for people, and together we are Vermont Strong. So we really appreciate y'all being part of this. It's an honor to be part of the call with you. We'll be in touch, and onward and upward, huh? Thank you so much for being with us tonight.